Hey everyone! Before we get into tonight's story, I just want to connect with you for a moment. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Are you settling in for the night? Or maybe it's your morning commute? Drop a comment and let me know. I love hearing from you all around the world. And if you're new here, welcome. If this is your kind of content, well-researched true crime told in a calm, respectful way that helps you wind down, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and means I can keep bringing you these deep dive cases every week. Alright, let's dim the lights. Get comfortable. Pull up your blanket. Tonight, we're traveling back to May 3rd, 2007. A night that would become one of the most infamous in modern true crime history. A 3-year-old girl named Madeleine McCann vanished from a holiday apartment in Portugal. And despite one of the largest international investigations ever mounted, despite millions of dollars spent, despite worldwide media attention that has never truly faded, nearly 18 years later, we still don't know what happened to her. This is the story of Madeleine McCann. Every detail, every twist, every heartbreak, told as completely and accurately as I can. Let's begin. On April 28, 2007, Dr. Kate and Dr. Jerry McCann arrived in Portugal with their 3 children, 3-year-old Madeleine and 2-year-old twins Amelie and Sean, for a spring break along with 7 family friends and their 5 children. The destination was Praia da Luz, which translates to Beach of Light. It's a village in Portugal's Algarve region with a population of about 1,000, known as Little Britain because of the concentration of British homeowners and holidaymakers. The McCanns, both successful doctors from Rothley, Leicestershire, England, had saved for this trip. They had booked through Mark Warner Limited, a British holiday company, and were excited for a week of sun, relaxation, and quality time with their children and close friends. They were placed in apartment 5A on Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva, a ground floor unit in a group of apartments known as Waterside Village, which lay on the perimeter of the Ocean Club Resort. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, modestly furnished but comfortable. Their friends were nearby. Matthew and Rachel Oldfield were next door in 5B, Jane Tanner and Russell O'Brien in 5D, and the Paynes along with Diane Webster on the first floor. The first few days of the holiday were idyllic. The children played together. The adults took turns watching them at the resort's kids' club while others relaxed. In the evenings, the group would meet for dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant, while the children slept in their respective apartments. This arrangement, leaving sleeping children in unlocked apartments while dining nearby, would later become one of the most scrutinized and debated decisions in the entire case. But at the time, it felt safe. The tapas bar was only about 50 meters away. The parents could see their apartment buildings from where they sat. They established a routine. Every 30 minutes, one of the adults would get up and physically go check on all the children. May 3rd, 2007 was their 5th day in Portugal. It started like any other holiday day. The weather was beautiful. The children were happy. That evening would change everything. At 7 p.m. on May 3rd, Jerry McCann read Madeleine a bedtime story before he and Kate put the twins to bed in a travel cot in the same bedroom. Madeleine was wearing pink and white Eeyore pajamas, a detail that would soon be plastered across every news outlet in the world. She climbed into her bed with her favorite toy, a stuffed animal she called Cuddle Cat. The twins settled into their cot. The apartment was quiet. At 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry left their ground floor hotel room to head for a meal with their friends at the Tapas restaurant about 100 yards away. The group of 9 adults gathered around a table. They ordered food and wine. They talked, laughed, enjoyed each other's company, but they were vigilant. They had agreed. Every half hour, someone would leave the table and check on the children. At approximately 5 p.m., Jerry McCann got up and walked to apartment 5A. He entered through the unlocked patio doors. He looked in on the children's bedroom. All 3 were sleeping peacefully. Madeleine was lying in her bed, Cuddle Cat beside her. Jerry used the bathroom, then walked back to the restaurant. Everything was fine. Around 9:10 to 9:15 p.m., Jane Tanner, one of the friends, left the table to check on her own children. As she walked up the street, she passed Jerry McCann, who was heading back to the Tapas bar. She continued to her apartment, checked on her children, and then walked past the McCann's apartment on her way back. And this is where Jane Tanner saw something that would haunt the investigation for years. She reported seeing a man carrying a child. The man was walking away from the Ocean Club area, moving quickly but not running. The child appeared to be sleeping or unconscious, wearing light-colored pajamas. Jane didn't think much of it at the time. Parents carry sleeping children all the time on vacation. But that sighting would later become crucial evidence. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield left the table to check on the children. He checked his own children first, then offered to look in on the McCann's apartment. He pushed open the door and glanced into the children's bedroom from the doorway. He could see the twins in their cot. He didn't specifically check Madeleine's bed because it was out of his direct line of sight and the room was dark. He assumed she was there. He returned to the restaurant and reported everything was fine. But Madeleine was already gone. At around 9 p.m., Jerry McCann had found Madeleine sleeping. By 10 p.m., Kate McCann discovered Madeleine gone, the bedroom window open and the shutter raised. Kate had gone to check on the children around 10 p.m. She entered through the patio doors as usual, but as she approached the children's bedroom, she noticed the door was more open than she had left it. She pushed it further. The twins were still asleep in their cot, but Madeleine's bed was empty. Cuddle Cat was still there, but Madeleine was gone. Kate checked the bathroom. She checked the other bedroom. She ran through the apartment calling Madeleine's name. Nothing. She noticed the bedroom window was open. The shutters had been raised from the outside, the window pushed open. Kate McCann ran back to the Tapas restaurant, shouting words that would echo around the world. Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. Chaos erupted. Jerry McCann sprinted to the apartment. The group of friends scattered, searching the resort, calling Madeleine's name. Other holidaymakers joined in. Staff from the resort mobilized. Within minutes, dozens of people were combing through gardens, checking under bushes, looking in storage areas, searching the beach. The Portuguese police, the Policia Judiciaria, were called at 10:41 p.m., but the response was slower than the McCanns had hoped. The first officers arrived around 11 p.m., more than an hour after Madeleine was discovered missing. The apartment was not immediately sealed as a crime scene. People walked in and out, friends, resort staff, police officers, potentially contaminating evidence. This would later become a major point of criticism in the investigation. On May 6, 2007, police announced there was evidence the girl was abducted and appealed for her return. The case exploded into international news. Madeleine's face appeared on the front pages of newspapers across Europe. Her photograph, those distinctive hazel eyes with a unique mark in her right iris, a coloboma that made her instantly recognizable, was everywhere. On May 11, 2007, David Beckham and other soccer stars appealed for Madeleine's safe return. Madeleine's fourth birthday came and went on May 12, 2007. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling pledged a contribution to a $3 million reward for her safe return on May 13, 2007. The McCanns launched an unprecedented publicity campaign. They set up Madeleine's Fund, leaving no stone unturned Ltd. On May 15, 2007, to raise money and awareness. Its website attracted 58 million hits in the first 2 days. On May 30, 2007, accompanied by reporters, Kate and Jerry flew to Rome in Sir Philip Green's private Learjet to meet Pope Benedict XVI, asking him to pray for Madeleine's safe return. But as the weeks passed with no breakthrough, the investigation took a darker turn. On August 7, 2007, Portuguese media reported that search dogs found traces of blood in the hotel room where Madeleine went missing. The forensic evidence was sent to Britain for testing. The dogs in question were highly trained cadaver dogs and blood detection dogs from the UK. They had reportedly alerted in Madeleine's bedroom and, crucially, in the trunk of a rental car that the McCanns had hired 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. On August 11, 2007, police said new evidence prompted them to consider the possibility the girl was dead, 100 days after her disappearance. Over the following weeks, particularly on the basis of their interpretation of a British DNA analysis, the Portuguese police came to believe that Madeleine had died in an accident in the apartment and her parents had covered it up. The theory was shocking, that the McCanns, perhaps after giving their children sedatives so they could enjoy their evening out, had found Madeleine dead from an accidental overdose or injury, that they had then hidden her body and later moved it in their rental car, that they had staged an abduction to cover up their involvement. On September 7, 2007, Jerry and Kate McCann were called in for questioning by police and named as suspects, given arguido status under Portuguese law. They weren't charged and were allowed to leave Portugal. Kate McCann was quoted at the time as saying Portuguese police were trying to get her to falsely confess that Madeleine died in an accident and that the couple panicked and disposed of the body. The McCanns vehemently denied any wrongdoing. The British public was divided. Some people supported the McCanns completely, believing they were grieving parents being persecuted by incompetent investigators. Others questioned their decision to leave the children alone and wondered if there was truth to the Portuguese police's theory. The tabloid media was merciless. Headlines screamed accusations. Paparazzi followed the McCanns constantly. It was a media circus unlike anything Britain had seen in years. But the forensic evidence was weak. The DNA tests were later admitted to be inconclusive. The supposed traces of blood could have come from any source. The cadaver dog alerts, while concerning, were not proof of death. On March 19, 2008, British tabloids The Daily Express and the Daily Star printed front-page apologies to the McCanns as part of a £1 million settlement in a libel case. They acknowledged there was no evidence to support claims the McCanns caused their daughter's death. On July 21, 2008, Portuguese authorities halted their investigation and said the McCanns were no longer suspects. The case was archived. No arrests had been made. No charges filed. Madeleine was still missing. The McCanns refused to give up. They hired private investigators. They continued their publicity campaign. They met with government officials, pushing for a reopening of the case. In 2011, their persistence paid off. Following a request from then Home Secretary Theresa May, Scotland Yard launched its own review of the case, known as Operation Grange. This was unprecedented, a British police force investigating a crime that occurred in another country. But Madeleine was a British citizen, and the pressure from her parents and the British public was immense. The senior investigating officer announced that he was treating the disappearance as a criminal act by a stranger, most likely a planned abduction or burglary gone wrong. The British investigators approached the case with fresh eyes. They reviewed all the evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and developed new theories. One crucial development involved the sightings on the night of Madeleine's disappearance. Remember Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m.? For years, that had been considered the key evidence of an abduction. But the rejection of the Tanner sighting as crucial to the timeline allowed investigators to focus on another sighting reported to Portuguese police on May 26, 2007, by Martin and Mary Smith, who had been in Praia da Luz on holiday from Ireland. The Smiths saw a man at around 10 p.m. on Rua de Escola Primaria, 500 yards from the McCann's apartment, walking away from the Ocean Club and toward the beach. He was carrying a girl aged 3 to 4 years with blonde hair and pale skin, wearing light-colored pajamas, and she was barefoot. The man was mid-30s, around 5'7" to 5'9", slim to normal build, with short brown hair, wearing cream or beige trousers. This sighting was critical because it occurred around 10 p.m., close to when Kate discovered Madeleine was missing. If this was the abductor, it meant Madeleine had been taken sometime between Matthew Oldfield's check at 9:30 p.m. and Kate's arrival at 10 p.m., a window of just 30 minutes. In 2013, Scotland Yard released e-fit images of men they wanted to trace, including one of a man seen carrying a child toward the beach on the night Madeleine vanished. The investigation had identified 38 people of interest. They had reviewed over 40,000 documents. They had taken over 1,000 statements, but still no breakthrough. Then, in June 2020, 13 years after Madeleine's disappearance, came what many believe could be the breakthrough. German prosecutors announced they had identified a suspect. His name, Christian Bruckner, a 43-year-old German national with a long criminal history. Bruckner spent many years in Portugal's southern Algarve region, where Praia de Luz is located. He has multiple prior convictions for sexual offenses, including against children, and a long record of petty crimes. Phone records place Bruckner in the area on the night Madeleine disappeared. He was living in an isolated farmhouse near Praia de Luz in 2007. He had previously worked at the Ocean Club Resort. Bruckner is currently serving a 7-year prison sentence in Germany for the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Portugal, a crime that occurred in the same area where Madeleine vanished. German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters made a stunning statement. "We are assuming that the girl is dead. We have a suspect. We are investigating him on suspicion of murder." This was huge. For the first time, authorities were publicly stating they believed Madeleine was dead and that they knew who killed her. But there was a problem. Despite the circumstantial evidence, Bruckner has never been charged in relation to the McCann case and has always denied any involvement in her disappearance. In September 2024, dramatic testimony emerged during Bruckner's trial for unrelated sexual offenses. His former cellmate, Laurentius Coden, testified that Bruckner had asked if DNA from a child can be taken from bones under the ground. Bruckner allegedly told him, "In Portugal, I had stolen there. There was somewhere with an open window. I was looking for money. I didn't find any money but found a kid and took the child." Coden also testified that about 2 hours later, the area was full of police and dogs, and Bruckner had left from there. This confession, if true, would be the smoking gun. But Bruckner's defense team dismissed it as unreliable testimony from a convicted criminal trying to reduce his own sentence. In October 2024, Bruckner was acquitted of 3 counts of aggravated rape and 2 counts of sexual abuse of children, alleged to have occurred in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. The court found the evidence insufficient and the witnesses unreliable. Bruckner was released from prison in September 2025 after completing his 7-year sentence for the American woman's rape. He was fitted with an electronic ankle tag and is being monitored. British investigators requested an interview with Bruckner, but he declined to speak with UK police. As of December 2025, Bruckner remains the only named suspect in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. German prosecutors say they have evidence linking him to the case, but not enough to secure a conviction. The investigation continues. 18 years. That's how long it's been since Madeleine McCann vanished from apartment 5A in Praia de Luz. If she were alive today, Madeleine would be 21 years old. She would have finished school, perhaps gone to university, started her adult life. But we don't know if she's alive. German prosecutors believe she's dead. Her parents still hope, against all odds, that she's out there somewhere. On May 3, 2025, the 18th anniversary of her disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann posted a message. "The years appear to be passing even more quickly, and whilst we have no significant news to share, our determination to leave no stone unturned is unwavering. The case remains officially open. Operation Grange, the British investigation, continues with a small team of detectives still working the case." In 2025, the UK government approved an additional £108,000 in funding. What happened to Madeleine McCann? Was she taken by Christian Bruckner, as German prosecutors believe? Was she abducted by an opportunistic burglar who panicked? Was she trafficked? Is she still alive somewhere, unaware of her true identity? We may never know. What we do know is this. A 3-year-old girl disappeared on a warm May evening while her parents dined 50 meters away. An investigation spanning nearly 2 decades, costing millions of pounds, involving thousands of investigators and witnesses, has produced no definitive answers. The case exposed debates about parenting, about media ethics, about international cooperation in criminal investigations. It showed how quickly public opinion can turn, how devastating false accusations can be, and how impossible it is to truly know what happened when there are no witnesses and no body. For Kate and Jerry McCann, every day for the past 18 years has been lived with an unbearable question. Where is our daughter? Rest now. Let this story drift away. Madeleine's face, frozen forever at age 3, those distinctive hazel eyes looking out from posters around the world, will remain in our collective memory. A reminder that evil exists, that answers aren't always found, and that some mysteries may never be solved. If you have any information about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, you can contact Operation Grange at the UK's Metropolitan Police or Crime Stoppers anonymously. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if this kind of content helps you wind down. And wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is, I hope you sleep peacefully tonight. Good night. Close your eyes. Listen to the rain. Let it wash away the stress of your day. Tonight, as the rain falls gently around us, I want to tell you a story. It's a story about a young man who disappeared on a rainy night in August 2013. A story about a 3-hour drive that turned into a 30-hour mystery. A story that, more than 11 years later, still has no answers. His name was Bryce Laspisa. He was 19 years old, a college student majoring in graphic design, with his whole life ahead of him. He had loving parents who waited for him to come home, but Bryce never arrived. What happened during those 30 hours? Why did he sit in his car for 13 hours at a rest stop, refusing to move? Why did his car end up at the bottom of a ravine near a lake, with all his belongings inside but Bryce nowhere to be found? These are questions his parents Karen and Mike still ask every single day. Get comfortable. Let the rain lull you towards sleep. And let me tell you the story of Bryce Laspisa, the young man who drove into the night and never came back. Bryce David Laspisa was born on April 30th, 1994, to Karen and Mike Laspisa. He was an only child, raised in Springfield, Illinois, and later in Naperville, just outside Chicago. By all accounts, Bryce was a friendly, charismatic kid. He made friends easily. He had a great smile, one of those smiles that lit up a room. He was artistic, creative, drawn to design and visual arts. He loved video games, especially his Xbox. He was close with his parents, the kind of kid who actually talked to his mom and dad about his life. In 2012, Bryce graduated from Naperville Central High School. That same year, Karen and Mike retired early and made a big decision. They were moving to California, specifically to Laguna Niguel in Orange County, a beautiful coastal community where they could enjoy their retirement years. Bryce came with them, but he didn't stay long. He enrolled at Sierra College in Rocklin, California, north of Sacramento, about 450 miles away from his parents' new home. The drive between Rocklin and Laguna Niguel would take about 7 to 8 hours under normal conditions. At Sierra College, Bryce was majoring in graphic and industrial design. His freshman year went well. He had a roommate named Sean Dixon who became a good friend. And he met a girl, Kim Sly. They started dating, and by all accounts, they were happy together. But something changed in the summer of 2013. Bryce went home to Laguna Niguel for summer break. When he returned to Sierra College in late August for his sophomore year, his friends noticed something was off. Both his girlfriend Kim and roommate Sean noticed that he had behaved strangely since returning to school. Bryce was allegedly drinking heavily, withdrawn, erratic, and depressed. Kim disclosed that Bryce admitted to taking Vyvanse, a type of stimulant medicine usually used to treat ADHD. But Bryce didn't have a prescription. He was taking it recreationally, mixing it with alcohol, a dangerous combination that can cause severe psychological effects. And then Bryce started doing something that would later seem ominous. He gave away some of his things, including his Xbox game console and a pair of diamond earrings that meant a lot to him. These were his prized possessions. Why would he give them away? On August 28, 2013, Bryce unexpectedly broke up with his girlfriend, Kim, via text. "You're better off without me." The same day, he texted his roommate Sean, "I love you, bro, seriously." These weren't normal messages. Sean was worried enough to call Karen Laspisa and tell her about Bryce's strange behavior. Later that day, Bryce drove to Chico, about 90 miles from his college, to see Kim in person. The visit was strange, uncomfortable. Kim was so concerned about Bryce's behavior that she also called his mother. After the visit, Bryce told Kim he was going home to see his parents. He said he had a lot to talk to them about. He got in his 2003 Toyota Highlander and started driving south on Interstate 5. It should have been a simple 8-hour drive home. But nothing about the next 30 hours would be simple. Let the rain wash over you. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation as we trace Bryce's journey through those mysterious hours. Bryce left Kim's apartment around 11:30 p.m. on August 28, 2013, and began driving toward his parents' home in Laguna Niguel. The route was straightforward. Head south on Interstate 5, pass through Sacramento, continue south through the Central Valley, over the Grapevine Mountain Pass, and into Southern California. But Bryce didn't drive straight through. At around 11 a.m. on August 29th, Karen and Mike received a notification from their insurance company that Bryce had called for roadside assistance in Buttonwillow in Kern County because he had run out of fuel. Buttonwillow is a tiny truck stop town in the middle of California's Central Valley, about 200 miles from Laguna Niguel. It's essentially one exit off I-5, a place where travelers stop for gas and keep moving. A man named Christian, owner of Castro Tire and Gas, had delivered 3 gallons of gasoline to Bryce around 9 a.m. But here's the strange part. Bryce had been driving for over 9 hours to cover a distance that should have taken 6. What had he been doing during those extra hours? Driving slowly? Taking detours? Stopping somewhere? No one knows. Hours after having fuel delivered to him, Bryce still hadn't moved from where he had stopped. Karen and Mike grew worried. They called Christian and asked if he would go back and check on Bryce. Christian drove back to the rest area. Bryce was still at the same location. It had been hours since Christian had delivered the gas. Bryce's car was fine. He had fuel. The road was open, but Bryce just sat there. Christian talked to Bryce, told him his parents were worried. Christian watched as Bryce drove off around 3 p.m., but Bryce didn't go far. After 7 p.m., a Kern County police officer found Bryce parked only a few miles down the road from Buttonwillow. In all those hours, he had barely moved. The officers were concerned. They spoke to Bryce's parents and learned about his recent behavior. The officers reported that he seemed lucid and friendly and showed no signs of intoxication, nor were any drugs or alcohol found in his vehicle. They performed a field sobriety test. Bryce passed. They searched his car with his consent. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing illegal. But there was something unusual. Bryce seemed hesitant to call his parents. When officers asked him to call them, he was reluctant, so officers dialed for him. Karen spoke with Bryce around 11 p.m. He told her he was repacking his car and would head home. She told him to get something to eat and drive carefully. Meanwhile, Karen and Mike were growing increasingly anxious. They called Christian again. Christian offered to go back one more time to make sure Bryce actually got on the highway. Christian found Bryce still in the same area at approximately 10 p.m. on August 29th. A full 13 hours since he had first called for gas. 13 hours. Sitting at a rest stop, barely moving. Christian followed Bryce onto I-5 and stayed behind him for about 10 miles to make sure he was actually heading south. Finally, Bryce seemed to be on his way. Karen and Mike stayed on the phone with Bryce as he drove. They asked him about landmarks, trying to track his progress. But Bryce's answers were vague, evasive. He said it was too dark to see signs. He couldn't tell them exactly where he was. At 2:08 a.m. on August 30th, Bryce called Karen to say he was tired and had pulled off I-5 to rest. He described the area as a residential area, though it was unclear exactly where. At that stage, Bryce had been awake for some 48 hours. Karen agreed that sleeping was a good idea. She told him to lock his doors and rest. She expected to see him in the morning. But that's not what happened. Let the rain carry you deeper into calm. Breathe slowly. Feel the weight of sleep approaching. In the early morning hours of August 30th, 2013, California Highway Patrol officers discovered the damaged remains of a car near Castaic Lake, in the mountains northwest of Los Angeles. Castaic Lake is a reservoir in the Sierra Pelona Mountains, about 100 miles south of Buttonwillow. It's a recreation area with camping, boating, and hiking. It's also about 2 hours north of Laguna Niguel, meaning Bryce had driven past his parents' home and continued north. Bryce's car was found wrecked at the bottom of a 25-foot embankment, lying on its side. The rear window was shattered, and it appeared someone had kicked it out from the inside. There was blood on the passenger side and on the back seat, but it wasn't a large amount. Investigators believed Bryce had likely escaped through the broken rear window and probably hadn't sustained serious injuries. But Bryce was gone. All of his belongings were still in the car. His phone, laptop, and wallet were all inside. His duffel bag with his clothes was there. Everything except Bryce himself. At 8 a.m., there was a knock on Karen and Mike's door in Laguna Niguel. They opened it expecting to see their son. Instead, they saw a California Highway Patrol officer with devastating news. Bryce's car had been found crashed. Bryce was missing. Investigators quickly pieced together what had happened in those final hours. Surveillance footage showed that at 2:15 a.m., Bryce had turned onto an access road rather than pulling off for a roadside nap. He drove up Lake Hughes Road toward the Castaic Lake Recreation Area. And here's the truly haunting detail. Security cameras captured Bryce driving up the same mountain road toward the recreation area twice in a row. Twice, as if he was building up courage, or trying to make a decision, or saying goodbye to something. The track pattern from the top of the embankment down to Castaic Lake led police to believe that the car went down the bank at a high speed and no brakes were used. Investigators determined that Bryce had accelerated intentionally when driving towards the cliff. And the way the cliff was positioned, it looked like the water was much closer than it actually was. The obvious conclusion: Bryce had intended to drive into the lake, that this was a suicide attempt. The immediate search for Bryce Laspisa was massive. Scuba divers searched Castaic Lake. Dogs, helicopters, and volunteers took part in the search. The ground search focused on Government Cove near the main boat launch. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no signs of Bryce. Police dogs tracked his scent across a bridge to a nearby truck stop, where the trail went cold. This suggested Bryce had walked away from the crash site, possibly gotten into a vehicle, and left the area. But if that was the case, where did he go? And with whom? On September 4th, 2013, charred remains were found near Castaic Lake. Bryce's family held their breath, fearing the worst. But DNA testing confirmed it wasn't Bryce. It was an unrelated murder victim from Los Angeles. 4 years later, in 2017, a skull was found off nearby Templin Highway. Again, testing ruled it out as Bryce. There have been alleged sightings over the years. In 2022, there was an alleged sighting in Missoula, Montana. Detective Ethan Smith investigated and found a man who looked so much like Bryce he could be his twin. But it wasn't him. So what happened to Bryce Laspisa? The evidence pointing towards suicide is significant. Bryce had been drinking heavily and taking Vyvanse without a prescription. He had given away his prized possessions, his Xbox and diamond earrings, which is behavior consistent with someone planning to end their life. He broke up with his girlfriend and told her, "You're better off without me." He told his roommate, "I love you, bro." These sound like goodbye messages. He sat at that rest stop for 13 hours, possibly contemplating what he was about to do. He drove to Castaic Lake and circled twice before driving off a cliff at high speed without braking. Many investigators believe this was a suicide attempt, and that Bryce's body is somewhere in the wilderness around Castaic Lake, perhaps in an area that wasn't searched or was overlooked. Some people believe Bryce walked away from his old life intentionally, that he left his phone, wallet, and laptop behind because he wanted to start over with a new identity. That he hitchhiked away from the lake and disappeared into a new life. This theory is supported by the fact that his scent led to a truck stop, suggesting he may have gotten into a vehicle and left voluntarily. Perhaps the crash was staged to make people think he was dead, allowing him to disappear without anyone looking for him. Vyvanse is a powerful stimulant. When combined with alcohol and sleep deprivation, it can cause severe psychological effects. Paranoia, psychosis, dissociation from reality. Bryce had been awake for 48 hours. He had been drinking. He had been taking unprescribed stimulants. His behavior during those 30 hours was erratic, confused, not like himself. Some believe Bryce was experiencing a severe mental health crisis or psychotic break, that he wasn't thinking clearly, that he survived the crash, wandered into the wilderness in a confused state, and succumbed to the elements or an accident. Though less likely, some wonder if Bryce encountered someone at that truck stop where his scent trail ended. Someone who picked him up, perhaps with harmful intentions. This would explain why he vanished so completely despite the extensive searches. But there's no evidence of foul play, no witnesses, no suspicious activity reported. Listen to the rain. Feel yourself drifting. Let the story wash over you like water. Karen and Mike Laspisa have never stopped looking for their son. They maintain an active Facebook page called Find Bryce Laspisa. They post updates, share his story, keep his face in the public eye. They coordinate with law enforcement, follow up on tips, and speak with anyone who thinks they might have seen him. On the 10-year anniversary of his disappearance in 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a brand new age-progressed image of Bryce, showing what he may look like today at 29 years old. Karen spoke with NCMEC and said that despite the devastating 10 years, she and her husband continue to have hope for a miracle that Bryce will be found. "We grieve while having hope for a miracle," Karen said. "Can you imagine? 10 years of not knowing. 10 years of every knock on the door making your heart race. 10 years of seeing someone with red hair and blue eyes and wondering, for just a moment, if it's him." On August 30th, 2024, 11 years after Bryce went missing, the family posted, "11 years ago, August 30th, 2013, Bryce went missing. Still no answers or closure. No confirmed sightings, but we appreciate continued thoughts and prayers, keeping Bryce's story alive." At the time of his disappearance, Bryce was 5 feet 11 inches and 170 pounds with blue eyes and red hair. He has a tattoo on his left shoulder of a Taurus bullhead and Roman numerals. If he's alive today, Bryce would be 31 years old, as of December 2025. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department continues to investigate. The case remains open, but with each passing year, the likelihood of finding answers diminishes. Where is Bryce Laspisa? Let yourself sink deeper. The rain is your lullaby tonight, and as you drift towards sleep, consider these questions that may never be answered. Why did Bryce sit at that rest stop for 13 hours? What was going through his mind during all that time? Was he afraid to go home? Was he contemplating suicide? Was he experiencing a mental breakdown? Multiple people checked on him during those hours. Christian from the tire shop, police officers, his parents on the phone. Everyone said he seemed fine, if a bit off. No one realized he was in crisis. Could someone have helped him? Could someone have intervened? Or was Bryce already too far gone, too committed to whatever he had decided to do? Why did he drive past his parents' home and continue north to Castaic Lake? That lake was 2 hours in the wrong direction. If he wanted to die, why not drive into the ocean near his parents' house? Why specifically that lake? Had he been there before? Did it have significance to him? Or was it simply the first remote, dark place he found? Why did he circle the access road twice before driving off the embankment? What was happening in those moments? Was he saying goodbye? Was he building courage? Was he changing his mind and then changing it back? And the biggest question, if Bryce survived the crash and walked away, where is he now? How does someone vanish so completely in 2013, an era of cell phones, security cameras, facial recognition, digital footprints? How does a 19-year-old with bright red hair and distinctive features disappear without a single confirmed sighting in over 11 years? Is he living off the grid somewhere, choosing to stay hidden? Is he suffering from amnesia, unaware of his true identity? Is he being held against his will? Or did he die in the wilderness, his remains still undiscovered in some remote area that searchers missed? The not knowing must be unbearable for Karen and Mike. The rain is gentle now. Your breathing is slow. Your body is heavy with sleep. Bryce Laspisa left his college on August 28, 2013, telling his girlfriend he was going home to talk to his parents. He never arrived. His car was found crashed near a lake. His belongings were inside, but Bryce was gone. More than 11 years have passed. Karen and Mike wake up every morning not knowing if their son is alive or dead. They go to bed every night hoping tomorrow will be the day they get answers. If you see someone who looks like Bryce, red hair, blue eyes, 31 years old now, with a Taurus bull tattoo on his left shoulder, please look twice. Take a photo if you can. Call the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, because somewhere, a mother and father are still waiting for their son to come home. Rest now. Let the rain wash away your thoughts. Let sleep come naturally, peacefully. The story of Bryce Laspisa reminds us that life is fragile, that mental health matters, that we should check on the people we love. It reminds us that sometimes there are no answers, only questions that echo through the years like rain on a window. Good night. May you sleep peacefully, safe and sound, as Karen and Mike continue their vigil, hoping for a miracle. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history. A killer who terrorized Northern California for nearly a year. A killer who taunted police with cryptic letters and complex ciphers. A killer who murdered at least 5 people and claimed to have killed 37. A killer who has never been caught. His name, the name he gave himself, was Zodiac. Between December 1968 and October 1969, the Zodiac Killer attacked young couples in lovers' lanes and shot a taxi driver in broad daylight. He sent letters to newspapers threatening to kill more people if his messages weren't published. He created elaborate codes that took decades to solve, and some that remain unsolved to this day. For over 56 years, investigators, codebreakers, and amateur sleuths have tried to unmask the man behind the crosshair symbol. Despite thousands of suspects, millions of dollars spent, and advances in DNA technology, the Zodiac's identity remains a mystery. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let me tell you the complete story. Every victim, every letter, every cipher, every theory. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. Our story begins on a cold December night in 1968, just 5 days before Christmas. 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen were on their first date together. David was a senior at Vallejo High School, an honor student described as intelligent and well-liked. Betty Lou attended nearby Hogan High School. She lived less than 2 blocks from David's family home. Both teens were from good families in Benicia, a small town about 40 miles northeast of San Francisco. They had planned to attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School that evening, just 3 blocks from Betty Lou's home. But like many teenagers, they changed their plans. Instead, they visited a friend's house, stopped at a local restaurant, and then decided to drive out to a secluded spot, a gravel turnout on Lake Herman Road that was well known as a lover's lane. David parked his mother's brown Rambler station wagon at approximately 10:15 p.m. The location was remote, dark, surrounded by rolling hills. Felt private, safe. They had no way of knowing that someone was watching. At approximately 11:00 p.m., a woman named Stella Borges was driving home along Lake Herman Road when her headlights illuminated something horrifying. She saw what appeared to be a body lying on the ground near a parked car. Stella immediately drove to the nearest gas station and called police. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a nightmare. Betty Lou Jensen was lying on the ground about 28 feet behind the Rambler, face down. She had been shot 5 times in the back. The bullet wounds were in a tight pattern on the right side, evidence that she had been running, trying to escape when she was gunned down. David Faraday was found near the right rear wheel of the car. He had been shot once in the head, just behind the left ear. He was still breathing when police arrived, but died shortly after en route to the hospital. Investigators quickly pieced together what they believed had happened. The killer had pulled up behind the Rambler, possibly pretending to be a police officer or security guard. He ordered the teenagers out of the car, possibly by firing a warning shot through the rear window, which had a bullet hole in it. David exited first and was immediately shot. Betty Lou, terrified, ran for her life. She made it 28 feet before the killer caught up to her and shot her 5 times in the back. The weapon was a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol loaded with Winchester Western Super X ammunition. There were no witnesses, no clear motive, no suspects. The Benicia Police Department had a double homicide on their hands, but no leads. For 7 months, the case went cold. And then the killer struck again. On the night of July 4th, 1969, Independence Day, 22-year-old Darlene Elizabeth Farron and her friend 19-year-old Michael Renaud Mageau drove to Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. The park was only 4 miles from Lake Herman Road, where David and Betty Lou had been murdered 7 months earlier. Darlene was married with a young daughter, but her marriage was troubled. She and Michael were friends, possibly more. That night, Darlene picked Michael up around midnight in her Corvair, and they drove to the park to talk and watch fireworks. They parked in the parking lot. Shortly after they arrived, another car pulled up. The occupants were laughing and setting off fireworks, celebrating the holiday. After a few minutes, that car drove away. Then another car approached, a brown car, possibly a Ford Mustang or Chevrolet Corvair, pulled up behind Darlene's car and sat there for a moment. Michael and Darlene watched nervously. Then the car drove away. About 10 minutes later, the same car returned, pulled up beside them and stopped. The driver got out and approached the passenger side of Darlene's car. Michael and Darlene initially thought it might be a police officer. The man was shining a bright light in their faces. But it wasn't a flashlight. It was the muzzle flash of a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The man fired multiple shots through the window. Michael was hit 4 times in the face, neck, and leg. Darlene was shot 9 times in the arms and back. The killer then calmly walked back to his car and began to drive away. But then he stopped. He backed up, shined his light on the victims again, and fired 2 more shots into each of them. Then he drove off into the night. Amazingly, Michael Mageau survived. He would later describe the killer as a white male, approximately 5 feet 8 inches, heavyset with short curly brown hair. The man didn't say a word during the attack. He just fired, walked away, came back, and fired again. Darlene Farron died at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. But this time, the killer didn't just disappear. He wanted to take credit. At 12:40 a.m., less than an hour after the shooting, a man called the Vallejo Police Department. The call was traced to a payphone at a gas station. The caller spoke in a calm, emotionless voice. "I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The caller hung up before police could respond. "I also killed those kids last year." The Lake Herman Road murders. This was no longer 2 separate incidents. There was a serial killer operating in the Bay Area, and he was about to introduce himself to the world. On August 1st, 1969, 3 Bay Area newspapers, the San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received an identical handwritten letter in the mail. The letters began, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last 4th of July." The letter was filled with deliberate misspellings, Christmas, prowl, experance, which investigators believed were either intentional to disguise the writer's education level or evidence of genuine illiteracy. But the most alarming part of each letter wasn't the text. It was what came with it. Each newspaper received 1/3 of a cipher, a complex code made up of strange symbols, circles, squares, crosses, astrological signs, and other cryptic marks. There were 408 characters in total, which came to be known as the 408 cipher. The killer demanded that the newspapers print his cipher on the front page, or else he would go on a killing rampage loose on a full moon night and kill a dozen people. The newspapers complied. The ciphers were published on August 2nd, 1969. For days later, on August 4th, another letter arrived at the San Francisco Examiner. This one contained a phrase that would become infamous. "This is the Zodiac speaking." The killer had named himself. The letter mocked police for their inability to catch him. It provided details about the crimes that only the killer would know, like the brand of ammunition used, the number of shots fired, and the position of the bodies. But the public wanted to know what the cipher said. Amateur codebreakers across the country began working on it. And on August 8, 1969, just 6 days after it was published, a Salina schoolteacher named Donald Gene Harden and his wife Betty June Harden cracked the code. The message was chilling. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or atop my collection of slaves for my afterlife. Paradise misspelled as paradis. Collecting spelled as collectio. These misspellings would become the Zodiac's signature. But the cipher didn't reveal his name, and the Zodiac had more surprises in store. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, September 27, 1969, 20-year-old Brian Calvin Hartnell and 22-year-old Cecilia and Shepard were having a picnic at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, about 60 miles north of San Francisco. Brian and Cecilia were students at Pacific Union College. They had driven to a small, secluded island connected to the shore by a narrow sand spit. It was a beautiful, peaceful spot, perfect for a romantic afternoon. Around 4:30 p.m., Cecilia noticed a man watching them from a distance. At first, she didn't think much of it, but then the man disappeared behind a tree. When he emerged, he was wearing something terrifying. A black executioner's hood with a white circle-cross symbol sewn onto the chest. He had clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes in the hood. He was holding a gun. I want your money and your car keys, the man said in a low, monotone voice. Brian tried to stay calm. He told the man they didn't have much money, but he could take what they had. The man seemed oddly nervous, fumbling with a length of clothesline rope he had brought with him. The man ordered Cecilia to tie up Brian. She did, her hands shaking. Then the man tied up Cecilia himself, pulling the ropes tight. Brian assumed this was a robbery. He tried to keep the man talking, tried to reason with him. You don't need to do this, Brian said. Just take what you want and go. The man didn't respond. Instead, he knelt down beside Brian and, without warning, stabbed him repeatedly in the back with a large knife, later determined to be about 12 inches long. Brian was stabbed 6 times. He would survive, but barely. Then the killer turned to Cecilia. He stabbed her 10 times, in the back, stomach, and chest. Cecilia fought for her life, screaming, begging, but the attack was savage and relentless. When he was finished, the killer calmly walked up the hillside to Brian's white Carmen Ghia car. Using a black marker, he drew the circle cross symbol on the driver's side door. Below it, he wrote, Vallejo, December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27-69-6:30 by knife. A signature, a confession, a trophy. Then he walked to a payphone at the Napa car wash, about 27 miles away, and called the Napa County Sheriff's Office. In the same calm, emotionless voice, he said, I want to report a murder, no, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. The call was traced, but by the time police arrived, the caller was gone. Brian Hartnell survived. He was able to describe the attack in detail. He said the killer was a white male, between 5 feet 8 inches and 6 foot tall, with dark brown hair, heavy set, maybe 200 to 225 pounds. He spoke in a flat, emotionless tone, almost robotic. Cecilia and Shepard died 2 days later, on September 29, 1969, at Queen of the Valley Hospital. She was 22 years old. The Zodiac had now killed 4 people and left 2 survivors. But he wasn't done. October 11th, 1969 asterisk. On the evening of October 11th, 1969, 29-year-old Paul Lee Stein was driving a yellow cab in San Francisco. Paul was a graduate student at San Francisco State University, working part-time to support himself while he studied. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Paul picked up a passenger at the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets in downtown San Francisco. The man asked to be driven to the Presidio Heights neighborhood, a wealthy, residential area. During the drive, the man changed his mind and asked to be dropped off 1 block further, at the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets. Paul pulled over. According to witnesses, the passenger shot Paul once in the right side of the head with a 9mm pistol at point-blank range. Paul died instantly. The killer then did something brazen. He exited the cab, opened the driver's side door, and used a piece of Paul Stein's shirt to wipe down the cab, presumably to remove fingerprints. He tore off a large section of Paul's blood-stained shirt and took it with him. 3 teenagers, Lindsay and Rebecca Robbins and their brother, were watching from a window across the street. They saw everything. They immediately called police and gave detailed descriptions. White male, approximately 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, heavyset with a crew cut, wearing glasses and a dark jacket. Within minutes, officers Eric Zelms and Donald Falk were dispatched to the scene. As they drove toward Washington and Cherry, they passed a white male matching the description walking calmly away from the area. But there was a crucial error in the dispatch. The suspect had been described as a black male. So when officers Zelms and Falk saw a white man, they didn't stop him. They waved at him and drove on. By the time they realized the mistake, the suspect was gone. That man, almost certainly the Zodiac Killer, had walked right past police officers and escaped. 2 days later, on October 13, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter. Inside was a piece of Paul Stein's bloodstained shirt, proof that the letter was from the killer. The letter mocked police. "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." The threat sent shockwaves through the Bay Area. Parents panicked. Schools increased security. Police began escorting school buses. The Zodiac was escalating. And now, for the first time, he was threatening children. Over the next several years, the Zodiac sent more than 20 letters to newspapers, police, a prominent attorney, and even a celebrity. Each letter was signed with his circle cross symbol. Many contained threats. Some included pieces of evidence, like Paul Stein's shirt, and some contained more ciphers. On November 8, 1969, the Zodiac sent another cipher to the San Francisco Chronicle. This one had 340 characters and became known as the 340 cipher. Unlike the 408 cipher, which had been cracked in just 6 days, the 340 cipher resisted all attempts to decode it. Professional codebreakers at the FBI tried. Cryptologists around the world tried. Amateur sleuths tried for decades. Nothing worked. The cipher seemed unsolvable. But on December 5, 2020, 51 years after it was sent, a team of 3 amateur codebreakers finally cracked it. David Orenchak, a software developer from Virginia, Sam Blake, a mathematician from Australia, and Jarl van Eyck, a computer programmer from Belgium, worked together using sophisticated software called A's Decrypt. They discovered that the Zodiac had broken the cipher into 3 sections and used a complex transposition scheme, reading diagonally like a word search puzzle with some words written backwards. The Zodiac had even made an encoding mistake that made the cipher nearly impossible to solve. When they finally decoded it, the message was chilling. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death." There it was again, paradise instead of paradise. The deliberate misspelling. The obsession with collecting slaves for the afterlife. The taunting, arrogant tone. But once again, no name. No identifying information, just more of the Zodiac's twisted philosophy. The FBI confirmed the solution, but it brought investigators no closer to catching him. The Zodiac sent 2 other ciphers that remain unsolved. One is called the Z13 cipher, just 13 characters that the Zodiac claimed spelled his name. Another is the Z32 cipher. Both remain mysteries to this day. The last confirmed letter from the Zodiac was received in January 1974. In it, he referenced the movie The Exorcist and claimed to have killed 37 people, far more than the 5 confirmed victims. Then the letters stopped. Did the Zodiac die? Was he arrested for another crime? Did he move away? Or did he simply decide to stop? No one knows. For over 56 years, investigators have pursued thousands of suspects. The San Francisco Police Department alone has investigated an estimated 2,500 people. Every year, dozens of new suspects are named by amateur sleuths and online investigators. The most famous suspect is Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester from Vallejo who died in 1992. Allen was the only person ever publicly named as a suspect by police. Multiple witnesses identified him, including one of the survivors, Michael Mageau. Allen allegedly told friends he wanted to call himself Zodiac and kill people in lovers' lanes. But despite circumstantial evidence, police could never prove Allen was the killer. His DNA didn't match samples from the letters. His handwriting didn't match. He passed a polygraph test in 1971. When he died in 1992, the case remained unsolved. Other suspects have been proposed over the years. In 2021, a group of investigators claimed Gary Francis Post, a house painter who died in 2018, was the Zodiac. They pointed to scars on his forehead that matched witness descriptions. But their evidence has been disputed. In 2022, author Jarrett Kobeck named Paul Dorr as a suspect in his book, How to Find Zodiac. Dorr was a North Bay resident who lived near Vallejo and was known for writing letters and creating fanzines. But Dorr died years ago, and the case remains unproven. As of December 2025, the Zodiac Killer case remains open and unsolved. The FBI and local police departments continue to investigate. Advances in forensic genetic genealogy, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer, offer new hope. DNA samples from the envelopes and stamps on the Zodiac's letters are being reanalyzed. But the DNA is degraded, and it's unclear if it even belongs to the Zodiac or was contaminated by postal workers or journalists who handled the letters. The truth is, we may never know who the Zodiac Killer was. What we do know is that at least 5 people lost their lives. David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein. 2 others, Michael Mageau and Brian Hartnell, survived but carry physical and emotional scars to this day. We know that the Zodiac terrorized an entire region, sent taunting letters that mocked police, and created ciphers so complex they took 51 years to solve. And we know that somewhere a killer walked free. Maybe he's dead now, living out his final years, his secret intact. Or maybe, just maybe, advances in DNA technology will finally unmask him. Rest now. Let this story fade into the background as you drift towards sleep. The Zodiac's victims deserve to be remembered. Their families deserve justice. And somewhere, the truth is waiting to be found. Good night.